Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healing Our Community podcast with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean.
And this podcast was designed to engage in real conversations about mental health, especially mental health as it affects the Western Slope. And today's podcast is dedicated to all of the firefighters and first responders that are taking care of the Western Slope, saving us from all of the fires that are going on. And especially this is going out to and dedicated to the three firefighters that lost their lives, part of the Rifle Helitack crew. Emily Barker, 38 of Michigan, Nick Hutcherson, 27 of Arizona, and Sydney Watson, 27 of Alabama. Um, it's a really tragic loss, and it affects all of us here out here in the West. And the whole point of this podcast is really to talk about something that affects all of us, every single one of us, here on the Western Slope, because of the fires, because of the impact, because of the tragedy. And I want to throw out a question to all of you out there. And this is a live podcast, so you can comment or ask any questions in the comment section on our Facebook page or even the YouTube channel. But how is your household doing this week? And let us know where you're watching from and how you're managing the emotional weight of the last few days. We are being impacted as an entire community. This is not just an environmental issue, even though the smoke is just covering the entire area. That smoke, it acts as this constant physical reminder of tragedy and the reminder of the fear and the possibilities, the negative possibilities that are going on. This affects every single one of us. The entire Western Slope is under fire bans. Now that we have 4th of July coming up, fireworks celebrations are being canceled, with good reason. But this is a systemic environmental stressor, and it adds anxiety and fear to all of us in the community.
Yeah, it's going to be really eerie on July 4th to not hear any fireworks anywhere.
Yeah, and this is, as I mentioned, it's localized trauma. It's very different than a big city. This is a very rural community, a lot of agriculture, and the fires and the lack of water and the drought is a real issue. It's a real stressor.
Yeah, I was listening to something today and they were talking about how ranchers spend all their time fixing their fences and keeping their cattle in. And now they're out there breaking their fences down to hope their cattle can survive.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
So, this is a, other different than the other podcasts that we've done in the past about anxiety and depression. This is an environmental collective grief and collective anxiety and fear that the entire community feels, whether they acknowledge it or not. It's always just present, and the thick fog and the smoke just kind of reminds us of that on a moment by moment basis. So there's this subtle knot of anxiety that is going on, in all of us. It can affect us in many different ways in our mental health. Like we could be more irritable. We could snap at family members over like really minor issues. We could feel numb, or just try to zone out or distract ourselves, from the heavy reality.
Yeah, every now I get a picture in my head of Ure. Ure? Ure?
Ure.
Ure.
Yep.
And, when we have company, we usually take them down there and take them to the Box Canyon. And I wonder what it's going to look like. And, you think that's not going to rebuild in our lifetime. It's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's far from over. I mean, they have zero containment down at in Uray, and I believe I think it's at 20,000 acres right now. So it's very, very dangerous. And then we have the Snyder fire, which is still going. I think there's 10% containment that's up in around Mesa County there. So, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the helplessness,
Mhm.
right? Because there's only so much we can do. I know that looking on Facebook, you have people saying, "Where can we donate? How can we help the first responders? What can we do?" And that's that feeling of wanting to do something about it and to help. Um, so there was a theorist. His name is Richard Lazarus, and his theory was that stress doesn't come from the event itself, but it comes from our brain's appraisal or interpretation of our ability to handle it. So, if we look at the Snyder fire, or the Golden Mountain fire, the drought, and our brain sees all of those things happening, sees the constant smoke, and says things are dangerous and unpredictable. So
Mhm.
it alerts us, right? There's this primary appraisal that our brain is asking, am I in danger? And then what happens is that there's a secondary appraisal. The question comes up, what can I do about it? Right?
Yeah, fear is a very inactive emotion. If you were out there, like the first responders that are out there, they don't have fear. They're busy.
Yeah.
They're busy
They,
working.
they don't have time.
But we're sitting here contemplating, like, how long is this going to last? I mean, we thought about doing a podcast on this like Saturday, and we're still in the middle of it. It's not over.
No, it's far from over.
Yeah, and we don't know when the end will be.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure you guys are noticing this in your eyes, in your lungs, in your throat.
Sure. Allergies are just
It's not allergies.
my allergies are terrible because of all
Yeah.
the particles in this air and everything. But when we can't make it rain, we can't change the wind, we can't bring back the fallen, our brain, it starts to think that I can do absolutely nothing. I can't do anything, right? I'm totally helpless. And so that is when our brain starts responding in that fight, flight, freeze
Hmm.
kind of response, and that's when we have this high anxiety, and we're just kind of on high alert.
One thing that we can always do, regardless of what situation we're in, or our ability to do anything else, we can always pray. We can always close our eyes and connect with something bigger than ourselves. And that it will instantly soothe that nervous system and help you feel better. And it's amazing what prayer can do.
Yeah, yeah. Those, talking about what we can do
Hmm.
when we have that panic or that feeling of something bad, right?
Hmm.
What we can do is we can shift our focus, shift the brain away from the uncontrollable to what we can control. And I
Right.
like this analogy is like, what's right in front of the windshield, right? Because we can't control anything down the line or down the road or outside. We can only control what's in front of our windshield. And, if we can kind of compartmentalize and focus on that, then we don't feel as much of that powerlessness, right? Which, when you're in that place of powerlessness, all you feel is then depressed and depression and beat
Hmm.
down.
It's interesting because the wildlife responds to this, our animals respond to this, and we've been finding more scorpions in our house. And I actually got stung today by a scorpion for the
Yeah.
first time. We lived here for
Yeah,
5 years,
the scorpion's sitting right
sitting
there
right
under our
there.
glass on
Oh,
our.
it's
Oh
it's
yeah,
still
he's
coming at me, right there. If you can see it, it actually hurts a lot less than a bee sting. It really wasn't a big event. It's just, but that's new.
yeah. Another thing that you can do is double down on intentional local connection.
Yes.
That is absolutely imperative. We've talked about isolation and withdrawing and being withdrawn in past podcast episodes, but it's even more essential now. When an entire community is going through this stress and this level of fear, and worry, this is a time to to make our connections more solid. Reach out to your neighbor,
Hmm.
check on an isolated neighbor or family member, you know, do something to connect,
Hmm.
because it's that connection that is going to help us feel like we're doing something about it, right?
Actually, in the female brain, when we go through a stressor, the female brain releases oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical, and it drives you to go seek out support and help. And so even if you can't do anything and your neighbors can't do anything, to collectively share in that is really beneficial for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I was just thinking about, coming from Chicago out here into the West, and it's such a huge difference, in the Midwest growing up there. I think the only thing that we worried about from time to time were tornadoes,
Yep.
right? We had tornado drills in school and everything like that. And coming out here, never even thought about wildfires,
Mhm.
and how that is, how that impacts the entire community. I mean, you're just looking out the windows, just seeing this
Well, even
haze and
even beyond the fires, we've had a really dry year. We've
yeah,
lost our fruit,
yep,
and it's it just goes to show you the fragility of life. And when it gets a little out of balance, it has a great impact. And I think humans used to live like that. They used to be very aware of famines and times of lack. And it's easy for us not to really experience that because we can just go to city market, right? But we still feel it inside. We still feel it on an unconscious level that something's kind of off and not quite right and a little scary.
and I was actually looking at, there was a report today, um, that they're dedicating the Teddy Roosevelt
Mm, yeah.
Presidential Library in
North Dakota.
North Dakota. And yeah, he talked about Teddy Roosevelt and how he grew up in a very affluent family on the East Coast. And after a tragedy of losing his mother and his wife
On the same day,
in the same day,
on
he
Valentine's Day.
got on a train and he went west to the farthest point where the train went. And I'm totally blanking on the name of the town now.
I don't know.
But he stopped there and he decided that he was going to, live there, and it changed his life,
Yeah, he fell
right?
in
He
love with
fell
the
in love with the
wilderness.
West, and with this the strong
He's the
strength
one
of the
responsible for our
community.
national parks.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And so, I think there is a resilience that
Hmm.
we can all tap into, when we connect with each other, when we realize the dangers, of living out here, but connect with each other so that we can really tap into that resilience.
I remember when we were hiking in the Silverton area for the first time. We didn't live here yet, and there's a flower. I forget what it's called now, but it's like the fire type of flower. And this flower only grows after a tragedy, after the fires or after an avalanche or something. And we walked through this avalanche area and we saw all these flowers. And there's always, something God gives us on the other side of tragedy, something that comes out of it that is um, the blessing. It's hard to see that when you're in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let us know if you have any questions or comments about this podcast. This is a tribute to all of the first responders and firefighters that are helping to, put out these fires that are going on. And specifically, it's also a tribute to the three firefighters that lost their lives. Just as a reminder, give each other just an extra dose of grace and patience this week. This we are all trying to come together as a community. We're trying to be resilient and survive through strength, and just really give yourselves a little grace,
Hmm.
right? And we wanted to end today with just a final moment of respect for the firefighters that lost their lives, and just give kind of a moment of silence before we end.